One act of kindness saved a boy's life. But when he returned years later, it was not to say thank you. It was to hand her a ring that would expose a buried fortune, reveal her family's darkest secret, and put her in the crosshairs of dangerous men who would stop at nothing to get it. The snow fell in heavy, lazy spirals. Outside the cafe window, the street was a blur of white and shadows. Inside, the smell of fresh bread and coffee wrapped the air in warmth. Maya wiped the counter with slow, steady motions. Her fingers were stiff from the cold, despite the heater buzzing in the corner. The bell above the door jingled. A small figure stepped inside. His jacket was torn at the sleeves. His cheeks were raw from the wind. The boy stood frozen by the door, his breath misting in the air. Maya's eyes caught the way his hands trembled. The cafe was nearly empty. Only an old man in the corner, reading a newspaper, looked up for a moment before returning to his tea. The boy glanced around, hesitant. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Maya stepped forward. "You can sit," she said gently. He shuffled toward a table near the heater. The sound of wet shoes squeaked against the wooden floor. Maya poured a bowl of soup without asking. Steam rose in soft curls as she placed it in front of him. His eyes widened. He gripped the spoon like it might be taken away. The first sip seemed to ease the tightness in his face. Maya returned to her work, but she kept glancing at him. Every so often their eyes met. There was gratitude in his, but also something else. A heaviness. When the bowl was empty, he stood. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a single crumpled coin and placed it on the table. Maya shook her head. "Keep it," she said. His lips pressed into a thin line. He looked at her as if memorizing her face. Then, without a word, he turned and stepped into the snow. The door shut. The bell jingled. Maya thought she would never see him again. But she was wrong. Years passed. The cafe walls changed color. The tables were replaced. But Maya still remembered that winter afternoon. Sometimes on quiet days she would think of the boy's thin hands gripping the spoon. She would wonder where he had gone. The city outside grew louder over the years. Skyscrapers rose where old brick shops once stood. Maya's hair turned a softer shade of brown. The wrinkles at the corners of her eyes deepened. But her routine stayed the same. Open the cafe. Serve the regulars. Close at sunset. It was a Tuesday evening when it happened. The sky was gray with the promise of rain. The last customer left and Maya was wiping down the counter. The bell above the door rang. She looked up. A man stood there. Tall. Broad-shouldered. His coat looked expensive, the kind with a cut so sharp it seemed to slice through the air. But his eyes, deep, steady, and familiar, made her chest tighten. He walked forward with deliberate steps. There was no rush in his movements, only certainty. "Maya?" he asked softly. Her hands stilled on the cloth. "Yes," she replied, her voice cautious. He reached into his coat pocket. When his hand came out, it held a small velvet box. He placed it on the counter without opening it. She stared at it, then at him. "Do you remember me?" he asked. The question stirred something old inside her. Her mind returned to the image of a shivering boy, steam rising from a bowl of soup. Her breath caught. "It was you," she whispered. His lips curved into a faint smile, but his eyes, they carried the same heaviness she had seen all those years ago. He slid the box toward her. "Open it," he said. Her fingers hesitated before lifting the lid. Inside was a ring. Gold. Simple yet heavy in her palm. But it was not the ring itself that froze her in place. It was the engraving inside. Her own name. Maya looked up sharply. Why is my name in here?" His voice lowered, almost a confession. "Because this is not a gift." The cafe seemed to fall silent, even the hum of the refrigerator fading into the background. "This," he said, "was a promise made long before you knew who I really was." Maya's fingers tightened around the ring. The gold felt cold against her skin. She searched his face for answers. A storm of questions rose in her mind. "What promise?" she asked. His jaw tensed. "The day you gave me that soup," he began. "I had not eaten for 2 days." His words came slowly, each one weighed down. "I was not just hungry. I was running." Maya's heartbeat quickened. Running from what? He glanced toward the cafe windows as if checking the street. Then his eyes returned to hers. "From the people who took my father." The rain outside began tapping against the glass. Maya gripped the counter for balance. "I thought your parents." "They told me he died," he interrupted, his voice sharp. "But I learned the truth later. He had been taken by men who wanted something he owned." His gaze dropped to the ring in her hand. "That." Maya looked down again. It was just a ring. Plain. Yet, the weight of his stare made it feel dangerous. I promised myself, he continued, that if I ever found the one person who showed me kindness when I had nothing, I would give them the only thing my father told me to protect with my life. Maya's throat tightened. I do not understand. You will, he said quietly. He leaned closer, his voice almost a whisper. That ring is the key to everything they are still looking for. The café felt suddenly smaller. The rain outside grew heavier, blurring the city lights. Her pulse pounded in her ears. What is it they are looking for? He paused. When he spoke again, his words were so calm they chilled her. The fortune my father hid, and the truth about the night he vanished. Maya's grip on the ring tightened until her knuckles whitened. The café felt colder now, despite the heater humming in the corner. Her reflection in the window looked different, smaller, uncertain. She set the ring back into the velvet box. You should take it, she said, her voice low. The man shook his head. They already know I am back in the city, he replied. That means they will watch me. They will follow me. His tone was steady, but his eyes betrayed the tension beneath. And if they think I still have it, he continued, you will not be safe either. A faint shiver ran through her. I am just a waitress, she said. He gave a slow, almost sorrowful smile. That is exactly why they will not suspect you at first. A car passed outside, its headlights slicing through the rain-streaked glass. Maya's mind churned. This was not her life. Her world was coffee cups, soup bowls, and the occasional winter storm. Not secret fortunes. Not dangerous men. The man stepped closer. I will explain everything, he said. But you need to trust me. Before she could answer, the cafe door swung open. The bell's jingle felt wrong this time, too sharp, too sudden. Two men stepped inside. Their coats dripped with rain. Their eyes swept the room like scanners. One of them smiled thinly. Evening, he said. Maya's chest tightened. The man beside her straightened, his expression shifting into something unreadable. The taller of the strangers spoke again. We are looking for someone, he said, his voice smooth but cold. Maybe you have seen him. He reached into his coat. When his hand came out, it held a photograph. The face in the picture was the man standing beside her. Maya's breath caught. Her eyes darted from the photograph to the man standing beside her. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The shorter stranger stepped forward, his boots leaving wet marks on the floor. Rainwater dripped from the brim of his hat. You see, he said slowly, our friend here owes us something. His gaze shifted toward Maya, lingering a fraction too long. The man beside her spoke, his voice controlled. I think you have the wrong place. The taller one chuckled, a sound without warmth. We rarely have the wrong place. The cafe felt smaller, the air heavy. The old clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. Maya's hands rested on the counter, but her palms were damp. She noticed the ring box still open in front of her. The gold gleamed faintly under the dim lights. One of the men's eyes flickered toward it. The man beside her moved subtly, positioning himself between them and the box. I said, he repeated, you have the wrong place. The shorter stranger's smile faded. He reached into his coat. Not for a gun, at least not yet, but for a small slip of paper. He slid it across the counter toward Maya. If you happen to remember seeing him, he said, call this number. His fingers tapped the paper once before pulling away. Then, with a last slow look around the cafe, both men turned and left. The bell jingled again. The door shut. The sound of rain filled the silence. Maya stared at the slip of paper, her pulse still quick. The man exhaled as if he had been holding his breath. They will be back, he said quietly. And when they come, they will not just be asking questions. He looked at her, his eyes steady but urgent. You have to leave with me. Now. Maya's fingers curled around the counter's edge. Her mind screamed to refuse. This was madness. She had a life here, a routine, a safe corner of the city. But the weight in his eyes told her safety was already gone. He reached across the counter and closed the ring box in one swift motion. Then he slipped it into her apron pocket. The gesture was final, leaving no room for debate. Maya, he said, his voice low, if you stay they will hurt you to get to me. The truth in his tone sent a cold shiver through her spine. She untied her apron with trembling hands. The air outside hit her face like a wall when they stepped into the rain. Streetlights glowed in halos through the mist. Puddles rippled under their hurried steps. Where are we going? She asked, keeping pace with him. Somewhere they will not find us tonight, he said. They turned down a narrow alley, the kind that smelled faintly of damp brick and old smoke. Shadows clung to the walls. In the distance, a car engine roared to life. His head snapped toward the sound. Faster, he urged. Maya's breath came in quick bursts. The ring box in her pocket felt heavier with every step. The alley opened onto a quieter street. A black sedan was parked under a flickering lamp. He unlocked it, ushered her inside, and slid into the driver's seat. The windshield wipers struggled against the pounding rain. For several blocks, neither of them spoke. Only the hum of the engine and the rhythm of the wipers filled the air. Finally, she asked, "Why me?" His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Because you are the only person I know who once helped without asking for anything in return." The sincerity in his voice cut through her fear. But before she could answer, headlights flared in the rearview mirror. 2 beams. Closing fast. "They found us," he said. The rain-slick streets blurred beneath the tires. The black sedan's engine growled as he pressed harder on the accelerator. In the rearview mirror, the pursuing headlights loomed larger. Maya gripped the edge of her seat. Her breath came shallow and quick. The wipers swiped furiously, struggling to keep the windshield clear. "They will not stop," he muttered. The chase twisted through narrow streets, each turn sharper than the last. Buildings became dark smears against the streaking rain. The other car kept pace, its headlights flashing in bursts as it closed the distance. "They want the ring," Maya said, her voice barely above the hum of the engine. He gave a short nod. "They want what it unlocks." Her mind burned with questions, but the urgency in his posture told her this was not the moment. A red light glared ahead. He swerved into an empty side street, tires splashing through a wide puddle. The pursuing car followed without hesitation. Maya's heartbeat thudded in her ears. The alley narrowed until it was little more than 2 walls pressing in. Then, suddenly, it split into 2 forks. He jerked the wheel right, vanishing behind a crumbling warehouse. The headlights behind them hesitated, then veered left. The moment they were out of sight, he killed the engine. The sudden silence was almost deafening. Only the rain pattered on the roof. Maya turned to him, her chest heaving. "What does it unlock?" she demanded. His gaze met hers in the dim glow from the dashboard. "A vault," he said. Her pulse skipped. "In it is the proof of who took my father, and every piece of evidence that could destroy them." The rain outside seemed to grow heavier, drumming like distant footsteps. "And now," he added quietly, "you are the only one who can open it." Maya's eyes narrowed. "Me? How could I possibly open it?" He reached into his coat and pulled out a worn envelope. The paper was creased and faintly water-stained, as if it had been carried for years. He handed it to her. Inside was a single photograph. It showed a younger Maya standing outside the café, smiling faintly at the camera. The picture sent a chill through her. "I never took this," she whispered. "I did," he said. "The day you gave me soup, I hid in the alley afterward. My father's men were already gone. But I knew one day I would find you again." Her stomach tightened. "You do not understand," he continued. "My father built that vault so it would only open for one person outside the family, someone who had once shown mercy to his bloodline without knowing who they were." His eyes fixed on hers. "That was you." A distant rumble of an engine cut through the rain. The sound was growing closer. "They doubled back," he said quickly. He restarted the car. The headlights swept over the wet street as they pulled away from the warehouse. For several minutes, the only sound was the tires slicing through water. Then, just as Maya began to think they might have escaped, a figure stepped into the road ahead. A lone man drenched in rain, his coat plastered to his frame. He raised one hand, signaling for them to stop. The driver slowed reluctantly, eyes narrowing. As they drew closer, Maya's breath caught. She recognized the face, one of the men from the café. The man smiled faintly through the rain. "Going somewhere?" Before they could react, 2 more figures emerged from the shadows behind them, blocking the road. The driver's hands tightened on the wheel. "They knew exactly where we would go," he murmured. Maya's gaze darted between the figures, her pulse hammering. Somewhere deep down, a thought she did not want to face began to take shape. Someone had told them. The rain pelted the roof like a drumbeat. The wipers struggled, smearing water across the glass as the 3 figures closed in. Maya's heart slammed against her ribs. Her eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. No escape. The driver's jaw was set, but a muscle in his cheek twitched. "They should not have known this route," he said under his breath. The man in front stepped closer, his boots splashing in shallow puddles. "You are predictable," he said, voice almost drowned by the rain. He leaned down to the window, his face inches from the glass. "Get out." The driver did not move. Maya's fingers curled tightly around the ring box in her pocket. Then the second man, the shorter one from the café, appeared at her side of the car. He tapped the glass with something metallic. Her blood ran cold. It was a gun. The driver's eyes flicked to hers. "Do not give them the ring," he whispered. The taller man yanked the driver's door open. Cold rain rushed in. "Out," he repeated. The driver stepped onto the slick street, his hands slightly raised. The gunman on Maya's side pulled her door open. The rain struck her face like icy needles as she stepped out. The third figure moved behind her, cutting off any retreat. In the flicker of the street lamp, she finally saw his face. Her stomach dropped. It was someone she knew. It was a delivery driver who had brought supplies to the café for years. A man who had smiled every time he handed her the invoice. The betrayal settled in her chest like a stone. "You," she whispered. Luis's expression was unreadable. "Business, Maya?" he said softly. The taller man stepped forward, holding out his hand. "The ring." Maya glanced at the driver. His subtle shake of the head was almost imperceptible. She felt the cool weight of the ring box in her pocket. The rain roared in her ears. She had seconds to decide. Maya's fingers tightened around the ring box until her nails dug into her palm. The taller man's hand remained outstretched. Impatient. Demanding. The gun at her side glinted under the flickering street lamp. Her pulse thudded so hard it seemed to shake her vision. She knew giving up the ring meant more than losing a piece of gold. It meant losing the truth. It meant losing him. The driver's voice echoed in her head. "Do not give them the ring." Her eyes flicked toward the gutter. A stream of rainwater rushed past, swirling leaves and bits of paper into the darkness of a storm drain. Her decision formed in a single heartbeat. She pulled the ring box from her pocket. The taller man's eyes lit with triumph. But instead of placing it in his hand, she flung it hard toward the street's edge. The small box bounced once on the slick asphalt and tumbled into the rushing water. "No!" the taller man shouted, lunging after it. Chaos erupted. The shorter man turned his gun toward her, but the driver slammed into him, knocking the weapon aside. A shot cracked through the night, its echo swallowed by the rain. Maya darted backward, slipping slightly on the wet pavement. Luis moved toward her, his face twisted in anger. "You do not know what you have done," he hissed. She met his gaze, breathless but steady. "Yes," she said. "I do." The driver grabbed her arm. "Run." They sprinted into the nearest alley, their footsteps splashing through puddles. Behind them, shouts cut through the storm. The driver's grip was firm, pulling her deeper into the maze of narrow streets. When they finally stopped, both of them gasping for air, she turned to him. "I threw it," she said. "I know," he replied, his voice low. And then his next words froze her blood. "But they will not stop because that was not the real ring." The rain still pounded against the alley walls, dripping from rusted drainpipes and pooling at their feet. Maya's lungs burned as she tried to catch her breath. Her eyes widened. "If that was not the real ring," she said, "then where?" He reached into the inner lining of his coat. From a hidden pocket he pulled out a small cloth pouch. The fabric was dark and soaked from the rain, but the weight in his hand was unmistakable. "This," he said, "is the real one." He untied the cord, revealing the same gold band, identical in design, but this time the engraving inside was different. Not just her name. Numbers. A sequence etched so finely it could be mistaken for scratches. "What are those?" she asked, her voice low. "Coordinates," he replied. Her breath caught. "Coordinates to the vault?" He nodded. "Buried under a place no one would ever think to look, except my father." Maya stared at the numbers, rainwater dripping from her hair onto her cheeks. "And now they will be after you more than ever," she said. "No," he corrected. "They will be after us." A sudden clang echoed from the mouth of the alley. A shadow shifted against the faint orange glow of a street lamp. The driver's face hardened. "They found us again," he whispered. Before she could react, a figure stepped into the narrow path, blocking the way forward. It was Luis. His wet hair clung to his forehead, and his eyes were cold. "You run well," he said, his voice almost mocking. Maya's gaze darted around. Two more silhouettes appeared at the opposite end of the alley, hemming them in. The driver took a step back, pressing the pouch into her hand. "Whatever happens," he murmured, "do not let them take it." Her fingers closed around the pouch. Luis smiled faintly, but it did not reach his eyes. Time to end this. The rain narrowed into silver threads under the dim streetlight. The air in the alley was tight, pressing against Maya's skin. Her fingers clenched around the pouch until she could feel the hard outline of the ring inside. Luis took a slow step forward. The two silhouettes behind her moved closer, their boots splashing in shallow puddles. The driver shifted his stance, positioning himself between Maya and Luis. "You do not want to do this," he said evenly. Luis's smile widened, but his eyes stayed cold. "I do," he replied. He reached into his coat. Maya braced herself for the glint of a gun. Instead, he pulled out a small black device, no larger than a deck of cards. He pressed a button. A sharp click echoed in the alley, followed by a faint static hum. The driver's expression darkened instantly. "What is that?" Maya asked. "A signal jammer," the driver said. "No calls. No GPS. No one will find us now." Luis's gaze locked on Maya. "Hand over the pouch," he said. The driver stepped forward, but one of the men behind her moved faster, grabbing Maya's arm. She twisted, kicking hard at his shin, and broke free. The pouch stayed clutched in her hand. Luis's smile faded. "Fine," he said. He nodded toward the man beside him. The second figure reached into his coat and pulled out a folded photograph. He held it up so the rain slid off its glossy surface. Maya's breath caught when she saw it. It was her. Not from the café, not from any moment she remembered, but standing beside a man she had never met. A man whose face was almost identical to the driver's. The driver froze. Luis's voice cut through the rain. "Your father is not dead, Maya?" The rain seemed to vanish into silence. Maya's eyes locked on the photograph, her mind racing to understand. "That is not possible," she said, her voice trembling. Luis stepped closer, the shadows cutting across his face. "It is not only possible," he said coldly, "it is the truth." The driver's gaze stayed fixed on her. "Maya, that man is my father. And yours." Her heart slammed against her ribs. The alley spun for a moment. She felt the wet bricks at her back, the cold pouch heavy in her grip. "You are lying," she whispered. But deep inside, something old and unspoken stirred, memories of a childhood she had never fully understood, of questions her mother never answered. Luis's smirk returned. "Now you see why you can open the vault." The driver's voice was steady but urgent. "They want the fortune. But what is inside the vault is more than gold, it is proof. Evidence that will destroy the men who tore our family apart." He stepped closer to her. "And that means you have a choice." The pouch felt heavier than ever in her hand. She looked at the driver, her brother. She looked at Luis, whose eyes were sharp with greed. And then she thought of the boy who had once been cold, hungry, and trembling in her café. She took a deep breath. "No," she said firmly. She pulled the pouch open, removed the ring, and slipped it onto her finger. The gold felt warm now, almost alive. "You will not have it," she told Luis. Before he could move, the driver lunged, knocking the jammer from Luis's hand and sending it skidding into a puddle. Maya darted past the two men blocking the alley, her brother close behind. The rain hit her face like fire as they ran, but her steps were sure. They burst onto a busy street, the glow of traffic lights cutting through the night. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. By the time Luis and his men reached the street, the police cars had already surrounded them. Officers swarmed, voices sharp and commanding. Maya and her brother stood back, watching as the men were taken away in handcuffs. The tension in her chest eased for the first time in hours. Her brother turned to her, rain still dripping from his hair. "You saved me once," he said quietly. She shook her head. "We saved each other." They walked side by side into the neon-lit night. Somewhere out there was a vault waiting to be opened, and the truth about their father waiting to be faced. But for now, Maya felt only the warmth of the gold band on her finger. It was no longer a burden. It was a promise fulfilled.